Section 2 of Reminiscences of a Southern Hospital, by its Matron, by Phoebe Yates Pember. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Sue Anderson. The depreciated currency, which purchased only at fabulous prices, the poor pay the government, feeling it necessary to keep up the credit of its paper, gave to its officials, the natural craving for luxuries that had been but common food before the war, caused appeals to be constantly made to me, sometimes for the applicant, oftener for his wife, family, or sick friend, so that even if I had given 1/10 demanded, there would have been nothing left for the patient. It was hard to refuse, for the plea that it was not mine, but merely a charge confided to me, was looked upon as a pretext, and outsiders calculated upon the quantity issued to my department, losing sight of the quantity consumed. Half a dozen men missed their poor dinner at the steward's table daily, and sent for anything, which generally meant turkey and oysters. Others had been up all night and craved a cup of coffee. And as for diseases among both commissioned and non-commissioned men, caused by entire destitution of whiskey, and only to be cured by it, their name was legion. Every pound of coffee, every ounce of whiskey, bushel of flour, or basket of vegetables, duly weighed before delivery, was intended for their particular consumers, who, if they could not eat or drink what was provided for them, watched their property zealously, and claimed it too. So how could I give? The necessity of refusing the livelong day to naturally generous tempers makes them captious and uncivil, and the soft answer to turn away wrath becomes an impossibility. Demands amounted soon to persecution, when the refusals became the rule instead of the exception, and the breach thus made grew wider day by day, till I began to feel like Ishmael, my hand against every man, and every man's hand against me. There is little gratitude felt in a hospital, and none expressed. The mass of patients are uneducated men, who have lived by the sweat of their brow, and gratitude is an exotic, planted in a refined atmosphere, kept free from coarse contact, and nourished by unselfishness. Common natures look only with astonishment at great sacrifices, and cunningly avail themselves of them, but give nothing in return, not even the satisfaction of allowing one to suppose that the care exerted has been beneficial. That would entail compensation of some kind, and in their ignorance they fear the nature of the equivalent which might be demanded. Still, pleasant episodes often occur to vary disappointments and lighten duties. "Could you write me a letter?" drawled a whining voice from a bed in one of the wards, a cold winter day in '62. The speaker was a Georgian, lean, yellow, attenuated, with wispy strands of hair hanging over his high, thin cheekbones. He put out a hand to detain me, and I noticed the nails were like claws. "Why do you not let the nurse cut your nails?" "Because I ain't got any spoon, and I use them instead." "Will you let me have your hair cut then? You can't get well with all that dirty hair hanging about your ears and eyes." "No, I can't get my hair cut, 'cause as how I promised my mammy that I would let it grow till the war be over. Oh, it's unlucky to cut it." "Then I can't write for you. If you will do what I want, I will do what you want." This was plain talking. The hair being cut, I brought in my portfolio, and sitting by the side of the bed, waited for further orders. They came without more formal introduction, for Mrs. Marshy Brown. My dear Mammy, I hope this finds you well, as it leaves me well, and I hope I shall get a furlough Christmas and see you, and I hope you will keep well, and all the folks be well by that time, as I feel well myself. This leaves me in good health, as I hope it will finds you, and... But here I made a pause, as his mind seemed to be going around in a circle, and asked him a few questions as to his home, his position during the last summer's campaign, how he got sick, and where his brigade was then stationed, etc. Thus furnished with some material to work on, the letter proceeded rapidly. 4 sides were filled up, for no soldier would think a letter worth sending home which had any blank paper. Transcribing his name, the number of his ward, and proper address, so that an answer might reach him safely, the composition was read to him. Gradually his pale face brightened. A sitting posture was assumed with evident interest. I folded it and directed it, contributed the expected 5-cent Confederate stamp, and handed it over. "Did you write all that?" he said with great emphasis. "Yes." "Did I say all that?" "I think so." A dead pause ensued of undoubted admiration, astonishment. What was working in that poor mind? Could it be that Psyche had stirred one of the delicate plumes of her wings, and the dormant soul was touched? "Are you married?" The harsh voice dropped very low. "No." He rose still higher in bed, pushed desperately away the tangled hay on his brow. A faint color fluttered over the hollow cheek, and stretching out a long bone with a talon attached, he touched my arm, and with a mysterious voice whispered imperiously, "You wait." And readers, I am waiting, and I here caution the male portion of creation, who may love through their mental powers, to respect my confidence and not seek to shake my constancy. Sometimes the compliments paid were pretty from their novelty and originality, but they were rare. Expression was not a gift with the common class of soldiers. "You will run them little feet of yourn off. They ain't much to boast of, anyway," said a rough Kentuckian. Was not this as complimentary as the lover who compared his mistress's foot to a dream, and much more comprehensible? At times the lower wards would be filled with rough men from camp, who had not seen a female face for months, and though too much occupied by business to notice it much, their partly concealed but determined regard would become embarrassing. One day, while talking with a ward master, my attention was attracted by the pertinacious staring of a rough-looking Texan. He walked round and round me, examining every detail of my dress, face, and figure, his eye never fixing upon any particular part for a moment, but travelling incessantly all over me. It was the wonderment of the mind at the sight of a new creation. I moved my position. He shifted his to suit the new arrangement. Again a change was made, so obviously to get out of his range, that with a delicacy the roughest men treated me with always, he desisted from his inspection so far that, though his person made no movement, his neck twisted round to accommodate his eyes, till I supposed some progenitor of the family had been an owl. The men began to titter, and patience became exhausted. "Well, my man, did you never see a woman before?" "Law's sakes!" he ejaculated, making no move towards withdrawing his determined notice, "I never did see such a nice one. You's pretty as a pair of red shoes with green strings." These were the two compliments laid upon the shrine of my vanity during 4 years' contact with thousands of patients, and I commit them to paper to give some idea of the portrait wanting for a frontispiece, and to prove to all readers that a woman, with a face like a pair of red shoes with green strings, must have some claim to the apple of Paris. Scenes of pathos occurred daily, scenes that wrung the heart and forced the summer rain of pity from the eyes. But feeling or sentiment that enervated the mind and body was a luxury that could not be indulged in. There was too much work to be done, too much active exertion required, and both mental and physical energies were severely taxed each day. Perhaps they balanced, and so kept each other from sinking. Besides, there was not sufficient leisure time to think, the necessity for action being ever present. After the Battle of Fredericksburg, while waiting in a sick ward for brandy for a dying man, a low, pleasant voice said, "Madam?" It came from a youth looking very ill, but so placid. He had that earnest, far-away gaze, so common to the eyes that are looking their last in this world. Perhaps God in his mercy gives a glimpse of coming peace, past understanding, which reflects itself in the dying eyes into which we look with such strong yearning to fathom what they see. He shook his head in negative to all offers of food or drink, or suggestions of a softer pillow or lighter covering. "I want Perry," was all he said. On inquiry, I found that Perry was the friend and companion who had marched by his side in the field, and slept nearest him in camp, but whose present whereabouts he was ignorant of. Armed with a requisition from our surgeon, I sought and found his name at the receiving hospital, from which he had been transferred to Jackson. He was soon seated by my side in my ambulance, and on arrival at our hospital we found my patient had dropped asleep. A bed was brought and put by his side, and Perry, only very slightly wounded, laid upon it. Just then the sick man awoke wearily, turned over, and the half unconscious eye fixed itself. He must have been dreaming of the meeting, for he still distrusted the reality. Illness had spiritualized the poor boy's face. The transparent forehead, the delicate brow so clearly defined, looked more like heaven than earth. As he recognized his comrade, a lovely smile curved his lips, heretofore so wan and expressionless. The angel of death had brought the light of summer skies to that pale face. "Perry!" he cried, "Perry!" And throwing himself into his friend's arms with an effort, the radiant eyes closed, but the smile still lingered around the lips. The golden bowl was broken. There is little sensibility exhibited by soldiers for their comrades in a hospital, and whatever feeling might have yet lingered in my heart was dispelled by a drawling voice from a neighboring bed. "I say there, could you give me such a thing as a sweet pertater? I belong to the 22nd North Carolina Regiment." I told the nurse to remove his bed away from proximity to his dead neighbor, thinking that in the low state of his health it might affect him, but he treated the suggestion with contempt. "Don't make no sort of difference to me. They dies all around me a-fightin' in the field. Don't trouble me." The complaints of wounded men still continued as to the theft of the liquor issued, and no vigilance on my part could check the appropriation, or discover the thieves in the wards. There were so many drawbacks to having proper precautions taken. Lumber was so high that closets were out of the question, and locks not to be found for any money. The liquor, therefore, when it had left my kitchen, was open to any passer-by who would watch his opportunity, so although I had the strongest objection to female nurses, the supposition that whiskey would not be a temptation to them, and would be more liable to reach its proper destination through their hands, determined me to try them. Unlucky thought! Born in an evil hour. There was no lack of applications for the office, but my choice hesitated between ladies of the best rank in the Confederacy and the commonest class of respectable servants. The latter suited better because it was to be supposed that they would be more amenable to authority. 3 were engaged and taught that the 15 wards were to be divided among them, 5 to each matron. They were to keep the bed-clothing in order, receive and dispense the liquor, carry any little delicacy of food to their respective wards for their sick, and do anything they were told that was reasonable. The last was an express stipulation. The next day my new corps were in attendance, and the bottle of whiskey, the eggnog, and the different stimulants for her ward delivered to number 1. She was a cross-looking woman from North Carolina, painfully ugly, or rather what is termed hard-featured, and very taciturn, the last rather an advantage. She had hardly left my kitchen when she returned with all the drinks, and a very indignant face. In reply to inquiry made, she proved her taciturnity was not chronic. She said she was a decent woman, and was not going anywhere in a place where a man sat on a bed in his shirt, and the rest laughed. She knew they laughed at her. The good old proverb that talking is silver, but silence is gold, had impressed itself on my mind long since, so I silently took her charge from her, and told her a hospital was no place for a person of her delicate sensibilities, at the same time bringing forward Miss G. and myself, who were almost young enough to be her daughters, as examples for her imitation. She said very truly that we did as we pleased, and so would she, and that was the last we saw of her. What her ideas of hospital life were I never inquired, and perhaps will never know. Number 2 came gallantly forward. She was a plausible, light-haired, light-eyed, and light-complexioned Englishwoman, very small, with a high nose. She had arrived at the hospital with 7 trunks, which ought to have been a warning tome, but she brought such strong recommendations that they weighed down in the balance. She received the pitcher of punch with averted head, and nose completely turned aside, held it at arm's length with a high disdain mounted on her high nose. Her excuse was that the smell of liquor was awful. She could not abear it, and it turned her stomach. This was suspicious, but we waited for further developments. Dinner was given out, and number 2 was vigilant and attentive, carrying her portion with the assistance of the nurses to her wards. Number 3, an inoffensive woman, did the same, and all was well. That afternoon, as I sat in my little sanctum adjoining my office, Miss G. put her head in with an apprehensive look, and said the new matrons wanted to see me. They came in, and my high-nosed friend, after a few preliminaries, said with a toss of her head and a sniff that I was very comfortable. I thought so too. She continued the conversation, saying that other people were not, who were quite as much entitled to be so. This was also undeniable. She said they were not satisfied, for I had not invited them into my room, and they considered themselves quite as much of ladies as I was. I rejoined I was very glad to hear that, and I hoped they would always behave in a way suitable to that title. There was an evident desire on her part to say more, but what was it to be? They finished by requesting me to inspect their quarters, which they were not satisfied with. An hour later I did so, and found them all sitting around a sociable spittoon with a friendly box of snuff dipping. It was almost impossible to persuade these people that the government alone was answerable for their not being provided with other and better quarters. They persisted in holding me responsible. The next day, on entering No. 2's ward, I found a corner of the building of about 8 feet square portioned off, a rough plank partition dividing this temporary room from the rest of the ward. Seated comfortably within was the new matron, entrenched behind her trunks. A neat little table and chair, abstracted from my kitchen, added to her comforts. Choice pieces of crockery, remnants of more peaceful times, that had remained for ornament of my shelves, were placed tastefully around, and the drinks issued for the patients were at her elbow. She explained that she kept them there to prevent theft. Perhaps the nausea arising from their neighborhood had tilted the high nose higher, and there was a defiant look about it, as if she had sniffed the bottle afar. It was very near, though, and had to be fought, however disagreeable. So my explanation was short but polite. Each patient being allowed a certain amount of space, every inch taken therefrom was so much ventilation lost, and the abstraction of 8 feet of ground for improper purposes was a serious matter, contrary to the laws of the hospital. Besides this, no woman could be allowed to live in the wards for many reasons. She was a sensible person, for she did not waste her breath in talking, she merely kept her place. An appeal made by me to the surgeon of the ward did not result favorably. He said I had engaged her, and she belonged to my corps, and was under my supervision. So I sent for the steward. The steward of a hospital cannot tell you exactly what his duties are, the difficulty being to find out what they are not. Whenever it has to be decided who has to perform a disagreeable office, the choice invariably falls upon the steward. So to his quarters a message was sent to request him to make No. 2 evacuate her hastily improvised premises. He hesitated long, but engaging at last the services of his assistant, a broad-shouldered fighting character, proceeded to eject the new tenant. His polite explanations were met in a startling manner. She arose and rolled up her sleeves, advancing upon him as he receded down the ward. The sick and wounded men roared with laughter and cheered her on, and soon she remained mistress of the field. Dinner preparation served as an interlude, and calm as summer seas, she made her entree into the kitchen, received the food for her ward, and vanished. In half an hour the wardmaster of the ward in which she was domiciled made his report, and indeed recounted a pitiful tale. He was a neat, quiet manager, and kept his ward beautifully clean. No. 2, he said, divided the dinner, and whenever she came across a bone in hash or stew, she became displeased and dashed it upon the floor. With so little to make a hospital gay, this peculiar episode was a godsend to all lookers on except myself. The surgeons stood in groups laughing. The men crowded around the window of the belligerent power, and a coup d'etat was necessary. Send me the carpenter. I felt the courage of Boudica. The man stepped up. He was always quiet, civil, and obedient. Come with me to Ward E. A few steps brought us there. Knock down that partition instantly, and carry those boards out. It was a fait accompli. But the victory was not gained, only the fortification stormed and taken, for almost hidden by flying splinters and dust, number 2 sat among her 7 trunks, enthroned like Rome upon the 7 hills. The story is not interesting enough to dwell on longer, but the result was very annoying. She was put in the ambulance with all her baggage and sent away, very drunk by this time. The next day, decently dressed, she managed to get an interview with the medical director, enlisted his sympathy with a plausible tale she trumped up of her desolate condition, a refugee who was trying to make her living decently, and receiving an order to report again at our hospital, was back there by noon. Explanations had to be written, and the surgeon-in-chief to interfere with his authority before we could get rid of her. End of section 2.